Welcome to this episode of Let's Be Civil. Today I have Dr. Ash Kotwal as a guest on Let's Be Civil. Dr. Kotwal received his doctoral degree from Texas State University in the Materials Science, Engineering, and Commercialization program. He has professional experience as an estimator, process engineer, and plant engineer in the construction and mining industries. Ash currently manages the Garwood Sand and Gravel plant for Martin Marietta, a leading producer of construction aggregates and heavy building materials. Hey everybody, we're back again to Let's Be Civil podcast on everything civil and related to civil engineering. And today I've got a good friend. You guys hear me say that pretty much with every call that I make, is here I'm with a good friend, Ash Kotwal, who is somewhere in the boonies of Texas. I think if you guys are fans of Live PD, we're going to have to break out the helicopter with the nighttime thermogram to find him. So, because I don't think is your address on GPS or anything? Has Google picked you guys up yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
So, yeah. So Ash works. Do you say in the mining industry? Is that how you would describe what you're doing right now, as being in the mining industry?
Yes, and thanks for having me on, John.
Sure.
So I'm a plant manager at Martin Marietta's largest sand and gravel operation. It's in Garwood, Texas, out in the boonies. And it is a form of surface mining. When we talk about mining, it encompasses everything from sand and gravel to limestone and granite, other construction aggregates to gold, silver, other minerals, and we're part of that massive industry.
So like when we're sitting in the classroom and we'll talk about a quarry is basically surface mining. So even though we might from a concrete or a steel production perspective, talk about going to a limestone quarry, in the business, you're going to talk about surface mining, and that's just an element of surface mining, is to get materials for making concrete or making steel.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And most of our material, not just here at Garwood, but within our company, is for use either in concrete or asphalt. At some locations, we make railroad ballast as well, other forms of base and other construction materials.
So the materials that you take out of the area where you're at now, it sounds to me, given where you're located, that it's all, or the majority of it's going on rail someplace, or is it more than just rail?
Out of this facility, about half of the material is railed into the Houston Metroplex, and then the other half customer trucks pick up for projects that are in closer vicinity.
Oh, okay.
And due to the geology in Texas, there are no limestone or granite quarries near the Gulf Coast, only sand and gravel operations. And so we actually have a network of rail yards in and around Houston and down even to the Corpus area, where we rail material, not just from here, but even from Austin, San Antonio area, even bringing material from as far away as Oklahoma and Arkansas, based on the demand and the project specifications.
So you're actually producing product or mining product that goes out to your other facilities that your ready mix operations and such, and then you're in some instances having to buy material from somebody because you're not able to get it there economically, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
And it really just depends on what makes the most business sense at the time for the situation or the project.
Right.
So Martin Marietta is vertically integrated. Our core competency is in mining, construction, aggregates, but we operate 2 cement plants in the state of Texas, one in Midlothian and one just south of San Marcos. In addition to that, we have a number of ready-mix concrete facilities. There are a few asphalt facilities. For the most part, we've gotten out of that market. But like you said, in some cases, we provide cement and aggregates to our own internal ready-mix. In other cases, we're selling to our competitors. And in other cases, we're purchasing material from our competitors.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to supply it to yourself if it's going to cost you more to do that than it is to get it from a competitor. But I mean, it works both ways. Everybody else is doing the same thing. So
Yes, sir.
it's just part of how the business works, right? So you are a Texas State alum. PhD from the MSEC program at Texas State. So talk a little bit about getting that first job after earning your PhD. Was it easy thing to do, difficult thing to do? Because advanced degrees oftentimes bring challenges with being hired once you have that degree.
Right. And I think that there were definitely challenges in finding a position. One thing that helped in my situation was after getting my undergraduate degree in construction engineering and then working for mechanical and electrical contractors for about 5 years, gave me some industry experience, both working in the field as well as doing estimating and project management before I went back to graduate school. Which then narrowed my focus into construction materials. And with both the academic experience, the previous work experience, and then the research and teaching that I did while I was at Texas State, and a lot of that being specific to the construction industry, mainly focused on concrete, aggregates, and cement. Martin was one of the companies that I really focused on, although I think during my job search, which I started several months prior to graduation, I submitted roughly 100 resumes.
Wow.
Out of that 100, I was scheduled for about 10 interviews, and then ultimately received just a few job offers out of those. One was from the Portland Cement Association for a position up in Chicago, and then one from one of our competitors. But ultimately, I wanted to stay in an industry position where I could both use the things that I learned in academia, as well as build upon my previous experience in the industry as well.
Sure. And people who watch this podcast would know that I would have taken the Chicago job. I think you probably know that too. So Chicago's my favorite place. But since you've been in the position, would you say that having that experience has helped you to advance?
Most definitely.
Your background has helped you to move through things more quickly, right?
Most definitely. So mechanical and electrical systems are a massive part of what we do at our aggregate operations. At the end of the day, we're turning big rocks into small rocks and cleaning them along the way. But that takes a lot of electricity and a lot of different mechanical components to do that. And having a good understanding of the materials, not just that we're processing, but the materials that we're using in those electrical and mechanical systems definitely is a benefit there. I would also say that some of the things learned in graduate school and in other places along the way, as far as learning how to learn and question things and look at things in a different perspective, and not just taking someone's word for it because they have more experience in a certain area than you do, even though at the same time it's important to remain respectful and humble in that process. But it doesn't mean that in my experience, at least, it hasn't been beneficial to be agreeable. And so to be respectfully disagreeable, just in asking the question why.
Right.
Why are we doing this the way that we're doing it? Not to knock it, but to get a better understanding of it for myself, but then recognize what may have been overlooked in the past if we're just doing something because it's the way it's always been done.
Right.
And so questioning those things, whether it's things that we're doing regarding safety, production, whether it's with a mobile fleet or crushing or screening, inventory control, which is a huge challenge when you're transporting material from different facilities across the state or across state lines, and being able to track all of that with consistent and reliable data and then make decisions based on that data has been very important. And based on all of that, I started as a management associate in North Texas, Oklahoma district, primarily working with our ready mix concrete group, and then had the opportunity to work at a couple of our cement plants as well. Ultimately, after about 9 months, I rotated into aggregate operations. And although most of my research background was in concrete and cement, from an operational standpoint, and based on the fact that aggregates is more of our core competency as a company, I've really enjoyed the aggregate operations. And so building upon all those things that I just talked about, the problem solving techniques, the previous experience and knowledge, and building upon what people have been doing and looking at different ways that they can be done. I was then put into a process engineer position where I had the opportunity to work at nearly every business unit that we have in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, optimizing different processes in all of those different areas of our operations. From there, I was put into a superintendent position at our Davis Limestone Quarry in Oklahoma, which is our deepest surface mining pit. It's about 500 feet deep.
Wow.
And then after being there for about a year and a half, I was transferred to our Garwood Sand Gravel operation here in Texas last August. And it's our largest sand and gravel facility. Primary means of mining here is with a drag line, and it's the only one that we have in the division. It's by far I would say, the most complex piece of machinery that we have within the division.
Cool.
And so my background in mechanical and electrical systems definitely has helped there, but there is still so much more to learn and grow upon.
Yeah. Let me ask you, so you had mentioned being respectfully disagreeing with individuals. Would you say that that's a character trait you had prior to this position, or is it something that you have acquired or developed as a result of things that happen at work?
I would say maybe a little bit of both.
Okay.
So at Texas State, even there were situations, or whether it was in research or teaching, or even being part of a startup company within the MTech program, where situations called for maybe some different action to be taken based on looking at what was logical and sensible, either from a research perspective or from a business perspective. And so some of that, I would say, was brought about from previous experience, some of these operations, and working alongside the guys that are operating the equipment, whether it's the mobile equipment in the pit or the fixed equipment in the plants, learning from them and working with them, and coming to realize that so many people, and it's not just in mining, in aggregate mining, and not just within this company, but so many people are doing things just because it's either the way that they were taught to do them, or it's the way it's always been done, and there's this tribal knowledge that's been passed down, and that's beneficial in a lot of areas to have that historical knowledge, but it doesn't mean that we need to continue to maintain the status quo. Right. We're always striving to get better in every aspect through continuous improvement.
Yeah, yeah, and you hear that, and you're young still, so you're going to get to hear it a whole lot more over your career. I've been doing this for X number of years, and it's always been fine, and why are we changing this now, and things like that. But you're right. I mean, you've got to be able to continue to improve. So let me take a path off of that. So I don't remember if you're aware that the students at Texas State are looking at civil engineering in a little different way, in that we're looking at the sensing devices and the data that comes off of them relative to any kind of an infrastructure project or asset. And so your operation there would be an infrastructure asset. I mean, you're doing things that, while they may not be, you're generating materials that are actually going to build infrastructure. And so, your systems there are infrastructure. And you were mentioning, information and data. How much of the equipment that you have there and the operations that you have there, like you mentioned, taking big rocks and making smaller rocks, actually have sensing devices connected with them that are monitoring the processes that you guys have going on at that facility?
At this facility, and it varies depending on the facility, typically just based on the size of the facility. If you're a larger operation, you can afford to do things that some of the smaller operations can't do.
Okay.
And so to a certain extent, the our plant here at Garwood, as far as sensors, we rely on some basic electrical measurements for monitoring some of the equipment, like amp meters,
Okay.
to tell us how much load that they're pulling and how hard we're pushing those pieces of equipment. In addition to that, for inventory control purposes, we have scales that are on the conveyors, and so they're weighing a dynamic load.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of variance that goes into that, and a lot of factors that we have to take into consideration, such as the materials, moisture content, variation in specific gravity, and so forth. And then in our field equipment, so some of the mobile equipment, they are outfitted not just with scales to weigh material, but also with additional sensors that can send out automated reports for
Right.
how productive they are, how much time they have, if there's any components that aren't operating efficiently or have become inoperable. And then within our drag line, there's a programmable logic controller and a very large motor generator set.
Mm-hmm.
And on that motor generator set, because of how critical that is to this operation, we have installed just about a month ago a set of temperature and vibration monitoring sensors that wirelessly connect to a base station, upload that data wirelessly to the cloud, and we can monitor it continuously. It also can provide alarms based on temperature of the bearings, based on vibration measurements, and give us an indication of whether that piece of equipment is operating optimally, or if there are portions of it that may start to be deteriorating,
Right.
so that we can take a more proactive approach to our maintenance and not just be caught off guard when it decides to shut down.
Right. Hey, I got to hang on real quick. I've got to run and grab some medication because I forgot to do that earlier, and my leg is starting to bother me. So let me run over to the bathroom real quick and grab a couple pills. So hang on
Yes,
a
sir.
second. Okay, thanks. I see you, but if you're muted on purpose, just to let you know that you're muted. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you weren't meaning to be, I didn't want you to start talking, and then nothing would come through. So, so I'm just going to jump back into the stuff. I actually waited there for a moment, give me a place to be able to do an edit. So,
Okay.
So you guys actually have expanded, even though you may see your use of data collection devices, sensors, as maybe on the smaller scale within the company. You are expanding your monitoring system and updating because I suspect that some of the weights and things that you have on your conveyor lines are just electromechanical simple devices, and this, like you said, you've got stuff now that's wireless and downloading to the cloud. I suspect others are hardwired, things like that.
There are definitely areas that we continue to use advancing technology in.
Yeah.
And it all depends on the feasibility of doing that. In some cases, they make sensors that you can put on every single bearing out here in the plant if we wanted to. The feasibility of doing that, both the initial cost as well as just finding the time to monitor all of that and set the appropriate alarms, wouldn't be worthwhile. But in cases where we have critical components that repair parts have long lead times, they're expensive. In those cases, we're definitely outfitting them with additional sensors in order to supplement our regular PM programs. And other than that type of technology, we've also recently been using drones for a number of different purposes within the company. It's actually something that I started doing about, I guess it was around 3 years ago. So not long after I started with the company is when that boom really started. And so I got a license, I got a drone. We started using it for stockpile measurements and mine planning and site planning. There are a lot of things in this industry that we're able to do with that technology as well.
So let's switch gears a little bit again before we wrap stuff up here. Let's talk a little bit about management. Because when you can be specific or general, how old were you when you left Texas State with your PhD?
When I left Texas State with my PhD, I had just turned 30 years old.
Okay. And in the first job that you had at Martin Marietta, you weren't supervising anyone, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
And
that's correct. So
how was that advanced from that first position to where you are today? Number of people that you are actually supervisor for?
Yeah, so the first couple positions that I was in, I was working alongside and working with a lot of different groups at a lot of different locations.
Okay.
But I didn't actually have a team that I was managing until a couple of years into my tenure with Martin. And so at our Davis Quarry in Oklahoma, I was managing about 20 to 25 employees. And at that operation, we make roughly 1.5 million tons of limestone every year. And then at this location at Garwood, we have at a minimum 30 employees, and we manufacture just over 2 million tons of sand and gravel every year. And there are a lot of responsibilities that come with managing employees within this industry. I would say even much more so than many other industries. So, as many of you know, quarries, whether they're sand and gravel or other types of mines, or they fall under the authority of MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Association. And based on their standards, which go above and beyond the regular OSHA standards, but are also quite vague if you really dig into them, there's some additional guidelines that they expect us to meet, but also within our own company, because of the benefits, not just of looking out for each other and keeping everybody safe, but by building a culture that does that, it naturally leads to better productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so in managing employees in this type of environment, it's not just making sure that everybody's doing their job and doing it efficiently, but making sure that we're all looking out for each other and looking out for ourselves and what we're doing, and not becoming complacent in certain tasks that we've done before, or maybe repetitive tasks that are done over and over every day. And so we're constantly looking at different ways that things can be done safer, but also in managing employees in this type of operation, it's critical that it's done by leading by example. Because if somebody sees a manager not doing something safely or that follows our guidelines or the MSHA guidelines, then they're not going to be inclined to work that way either.
So, for your employment, have you been provided any professional development opportunities that relate to managing employees, or there's always some HR training kind of things that can be available, but is that part of the training for you in prepping you to move to the next job that you've had?
It's definitely been a combination of both formal and I'd say more often than not informal trial by fire type of training. But within Martin, we have not just a talent acquisition group, but also talent development group. And they've put together several courses that are available online and in person. So we do a lot of training in-house, in addition to collaborating with other associations within our industry to obtain additional management and leadership skills, both for purposes of operating safely, operating with environmental aspects in mind, as well as productivity and efficiency and cost effectiveness, all of those things. And so some of it has been formal. Other parts of it have been either me working alongside and with other managers and learning from them, which is maybe a little less structured approach, but that's definitely been beneficial as well. And being able to do that at many different business units across the division gave me a wide variety of different approaches that people take, seeing what works good and what works great, and some things that haven't worked as well. And so both formal training, learning from others, and then taking ownership of an operation and a team, and learning through that management experience as well.
Right. Let me ask you one last question, and I've already got things to ask you about in the future, because it'd be interesting to have a conversation about the environmental side, just kind of focus on the environmental side of what you do. But let me ask you this one last item for today. What have you had an experience yet where you have said, now that was worth me having taken this job? That you got to see something in terms of a neat application of the materials, or you made some change in a system, and profitability or efficiency went way up, or something where it's like you went home at the end of that day and said, boy, this was a great day because X happened. Have you had one of those days yet?
I have had several of those days.
Okay.
So,
Well, pick one. One of the other interesting things about the journey that I've been on with this company is because of the expectations that they have for me. Mm-hmm. They've put me in the locations with the biggest challenges. Okay.
And because of that, there have been a lot of moments where things have gone really well because of things that we've done to overcome some of those challenges, but also being in some of those operations made it to where there were probably equally both in number and magnitude some negative experiences as well, and not necessarily negative as in somebody getting hurt or something bad happening, other than equipment just falling apart because it hasn't been taken care of. But I'd say one of the biggest things, and it was early on in my experience with the aggregate group, is when I first joined the aggregate group in North Texas. I was working at some of our rail yards and quarries in that area. So most of the quarries in North Texas are in the Bridgeport and Chico area. A lot of our competitors have plants there as well. But the material is sent mostly by rail to the DFW area. We receive material from Oklahoma operations and Arkansas operations and DFW as well. So there's a lot of material coming from a lot of different locations, mm-hmm. and being able to track that properly and account for the inventory that we have properly, mm-hmm. is very difficult to do, both because of the quantity of the material that's moving in and out of these facilities, and the number of different types of materials moving in and out of the facilities. So one of the challenges that I was faced with early on was assisting some of the rail managers in getting a better handle on the control of our inventory there. Because we're a publicly traded company, there are a lot of different aspects of that come back and relate directly to what we do every day at an operation. And that's just because in being a publicly traded company, we were not only required to have a lot of third-party accountability, but it benefits us to have that. And so there was a period where inventory checks would be done, and there could be losses or gains in the thousands or tens of thousands, if not millions of tons at different operations because of the difficulty in accounting for all this material going everywhere. And so building different standards and workflow processes that resulted in reducing that variance to where it was something manageable that we could make better informed decisions on was a big win early on, and led to a lot of other good things as well.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, when we're making decisions based on whether it's how many days we're going to operate this week, or what equipment and supplies we're going to purchase, it all comes back to the quality and the quantity of the information that we have. The better that information is, and the more of it that we have, the better our decisions are going to be. And so that's really been my focus, and in using that principle in general in every different aspect has proven to be very beneficial.
Nice. Excellent. Well, we're going to have to call it a day today, but as I have said with just nearly every single guest, you've given me many, many reasons to call back and have follow-up conversations, including a chance to maybe have you go out in the yard and show us a few pieces of equipment and some operations going on. So I look forward to that. So Ash, thanks for being on Let's Be Civil. Look forward to talking to you soon. I'll be watching Google Maps to see when there's a road that leads up to your place of business. So,
all right. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. It was nice talking to you.
Yep. Good to see you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yep. Bye.